I'm Jennifer Bradley, and this is my literary autobiography. I come from a long line of avid readers. There were lots of books in my nursery, my house. My maternal grandmother was a collector, and antique books were just one of her collections. Of course, many of these were much too fragile to actually touch, but we knew that they were valuable. My paternal grandfather loved to collect books. He was especially proud of his own published volumes, which detailed the quintessential American dream. My maternal grandmother's family has produced well-versed Protestant ministers since the Reformation, so printed religious material is highly prized by that side of the family. As a young child, I remember going to the library, first for story time, but then one day I received my very own library card. In fact, I thought it was a credit card similar to my mother's riches card. I could go up to the counter with my book, provide the lady, the very nice librarian, with my library card, and I could take any book of my choosing out of the library. How exciting! As a young child, I really loved to read picture books, and then moved into chapter books such as The Cricket and Times Square. Also, books of poetry, some of my favorite being Shel Silverstein, especially Where the Sidewalk Ends. I read a lot during elementary school, especially during summer vacation, when we would make a 2-day trek to my grandmother's very primitive lake cottage in rural Minnesota. This was an old school lake cottage. There was electricity some of the time. There was a television, but it only received one channel, which was basically snow. Rest time, evenings, and rainy days were reading time. It was during those summers at the lake that I fell in love with Laura Ingalls Wilder and her tales of Little House on the Prairie. I really loved the television show Little House on the Prairie, which was very popular at the time, and I loved to watch Laura's adventures every week. During the summer, I was cut off from the television, but I felt I wanted to keep my connection with the girl I felt I had so much in common. We both had long auburn hair, freckles, 2 sisters, an annoying brat as a neighbor, and our families seemed to move around quite a bit. Even more coincidental was that during the summers I was staying in the very area in which Laura's stories were based a century earlier. My mother, in an effort to fortify my interest in reading, bought me the very first volume as a surprise for the car ride to the lake that summer, and quickly replenished the volumes as quickly as I could read them, eventually amassing the entire collection before the return trip home that fall. I felt so connected to Laura and the life she detailed in her books that summer, I could hardly ever put them down. Even though I liked to read, and I read a lot, it wasn't always easy, and I often struggled. Sometimes the words in the letters didn't stay in order. Sometimes the letters were backwards. These issues are now classified as dyslexia, but at the time I was just classified as a slow reader who was easily distracted. I'm so glad I didn't give up. One of my most memorable teachers was my 8th grade English teacher. She introduced some classic stories, including The Tale of Two Cities, as well as classical mythology. I remember how characters such as Madame Defarge came to life through her animated reading. As I progressed into high school, I was uninspired as a student, and even less so as a reader. College brought a renewed interest in literature. I really enjoyed reading and studying literature from a critical perspective, but I found I had little time for pleasure reading. Upon the completion of my degree, I put the books aside. I continued to read trade journals and magazines, but had little time or inclination for reading. After my son was born, we would visit the library together, as I did when I was a child. One of my son's favorite first books was Frog and Toad Together. I probably could recite that for you. Once I became my children's driver, I I discovered I had many segments throughout the day of idle time, which I began to fill with reading my own selections. I can't imagine what I would have done with the hours of waiting in carpool, the hours of waiting at practices of all sorts, the hours of sitting by the pool without the escape of any of my books. Even though now my children are grown and they drive themselves, and I don't have as much idle time as I used to, I still have at least 3 novels going at any one time. I often participate in a Bible study series as well. But actually, some of my favorite Bible studies include historical novels that correspond to a biblical period or theme. By incorporating scripture in a story, which illuminates it, I feel I have a better understanding of the message and meaning of the underlying text. I'm committed to a book club of my peers that meets every other month. I look forward to the fellowship, which always includes a gourmet meal and lots of laughter, but also sharing our impressions and insights of the 2 selections we commit to read every other month. I love to read, but also I love to cook, so therefore I love cookbooks. And a lot of cookbooks actually tell a story. Julia Child has many stories in her cookbooks about post-war France. Some might argue that electronic media is causing a decline in reading habits. The use of my phone and tablet have actually supported my reading habits. Look what I can fit in my phone compared to. I always have my smartphone and usually my tablet, which I can access almost anywhere. I no longer feel obligated to carry around heavy volumes of literature.